As teachers of science, it is our job to expose our students to everything there is to know about science, to do in science, to enjoy about science. Here at Florida International University, we present a series of speakers who will introduce to our students when in their lives they got interested in what they did, what made them passionate about the questions that they ask. We present to you Confluence, Episode 3, where life and science meet.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Marcy Lowenstein. I'm a biology professor here at Florida International University. And today our esteemed guest is Dr. Shaun Brothers from the University of Miami Medical School. And Shaun is one of the... Is that okay if I call you Shaun?
Please call me Shaun.
Shaun is one of the founding members of the Genomics Institute at University of Miami. And Shaun is here to tell us today how he came to science and to tell us a little bit about himself. So Shaun, if you wouldn't mind telling us how you came to science, what interested you in science?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So my name is Shaun Brothers. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. I'm a founding member of the Center for Therapeutic Innovation there, and I'm a faculty member in the Hussman Institute for Human Genomics. I received my Bachelor's of Science degree from the Oregon State University in, I guess it was 2000. And then I went on to get a doctorate in physiology and pharmacology from Oregon Health Sciences University in 2005. After that, I did my postdoctoral training at the Scripps Research Institute in Jupiter, Florida, Scripps, Florida, for a couple of years. And after that, I moved to the University of Miami. Many people tell me that I'm young looking for where I'm at, which I enjoy thoroughly. And I suppose you might say that I am young. I'm 33 years old, and I've been doing science since I was 18 actually. My first endeavor into a scientific laboratory came in 1996, where I was a high school senior. I had graduated high school, and the very next day, I graduated on a Friday, and the next Monday I went into the lab. And it was through a program started by James Parker at the Oregon National Primate Research Center. And what James Parker did and his colleagues was to bring promising high school students out from high school programs throughout the state and put them into a laboratory experience to really give them an idea of what it was like to be in a laboratory. And I signed up because my biology teacher at the time had suggested to me that I might be interested in the program. And I was ultimately accepted into it. And I basically spent a summer doing biomedical research, although in retrospect I had no idea what I was doing. They told me what to do and how to do it, but I really had no concept of what it is that I was doing, which was fine. I loved it anyway. I can tell you that I was isolating protein A from a bacteria, which is about as sexy as it sounds. At the end of the summer, the man who I was working for, Dr. Michael Kahn, invited me back. And he said, you clearly enjoyed your summer for the difficult project that I put you on. And he said, we'd like to have you back next summer. And so the next summer I came back after going to college during the year, and it continued on like that. So I would spend my summers in a laboratory and my school year at college. And I enjoyed that process a great deal. So much so that when it came time for me to decide what I wanted to do with my life after I graduated, Dr. Kahn invited me to attend graduate school, and I could think of nothing better. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed that prospect a great deal. So I entered graduate school at Oregon Health Sciences University, and ultimately got my PhD in the very same lab. After I was done, I had published quite a bit of papers and had done quite a bit of science that surrounded G protein coupled receptors, which are major signaling molecules in your body. They're, for example, important for light reception. They're important for mediating the signal of adrenaline and a number of other different signaling systems. So with that background and my experience in developing drugs that target G protein coupled receptors and figuring out what the drugs did, I decided that I wanted to continue on this path of doing drug discovery for G protein coupled receptor signaling systems. And I interviewed at a couple of pretty interesting places. I interviewed at Eli Lilly, I interviewed at Novartis, and I interviewed at a couple of other places. And ultimately, there was Scripps, Florida had just started a year before I interviewed there. Ultimately, I decided to go there simply because I knew that I would be able to do the drug discovery that I wanted to do under a fantastic mentor, Dr. Klaus Wallstedt. And Dr. Wallstedt immediately provided me with the ability to become independent and told me, in point of fact, during my interview that he wanted me to take my own directions. And this was enormously appealing for me, even more so than the greater salary that I might get at somewhere like Eli Lilly. After a couple of years doing a postdoc with Dr. Wallstedt, I started to progress up through the ranks, and eventually we all moved, Dr. Wallstedt included, to the University of Miami, where I was able to become independent, an assistant professor, and start my own research and my own labs, where I continue to do drug development work for G protein coupled receptors, and also expanding that now into epigenetics, histone modifying enzymes, and other areas of research. So I always like to maintain a focus on diseases, and I've contributed to projects for diseases such as autism, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, obesity, schizophrenia, addiction, alcoholism, cocaine addiction, just a huge number of different diseases, and myself and my colleagues, we are all working together to try to find not only the biological basis for these diseases, but also for potential treatments for these diseases, which I feel is important in a scientific career.
If you had to sort of share with us the things that you like most about science, and then the flip side, because all of us who are in science love and are very passionate about certain things, but then there are other things that no job is perfect.
Sure.
So
Absolutely.
if you could share what you really like about science and then the things that you like least about science.
I mean, obviously I'm a scientist because I really like science, and I think one of my favorite things about science is that I do view it as more of a hobby than a job. I get to wake up and do my hobby every day. You'll find me reading papers on the weekend because I really want to get to that paper to read it. And so that's one of my most favorite things. The other things that I enjoy, obviously it's an interesting career, brings me interesting people, interesting places, but I enjoy the fact that I'm working on things that may one day impact people's lives, and I'm talking about diseases. There was a powerful experience in my history where a man with a disease that I was working on came and actually thanked me for working on that disease. And that's always stuck with me, and I've always enjoyed that idea of being able to help people, even though they may not know that I'm potentially helping them, that I'm the one. It doesn't matter. That I can help people is important to me. The flip side of that, science is not an easy job. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. It sometimes takes a little bit of perseverance. You get bad data, or you have a bad couple of weeks at work, and it does get to be a little bit stressful and difficult. Grant writing is no fun, and long hours can be tedious at times, but for me those are minor inconveniences, and I think they can be associated with any job. So for being in science, that's not that big of a detractor for me. Yeah, I think bad data is probably one of the worst ones, because if you can't crack a project open, boy, that's you're frustrating. You're working for months and months of time, and you really pour yourself into it, and not being able to crack it open, that can be difficult, for sure.
That is difficult. So when you feel some of these, because we all have setbacks and we all face obstacles in our research, in whichever part of the career of our careers, or in all parts of our careers, could you discuss, or would you mind discussing some of the obstacles or setbacks that you've had to overcome?
Sure. I think my biggest obstacle in my entire life has always been myself. I have never felt adequate to do the job that I'm doing. And in fact, when I was in university and going through my undergrad and even in high school, I would sit in my class and I would say, everybody else is so smart compared to me. How can I possibly do anything in this world? These guys are way smarter. They're way ahead of me. And this has continued with me until this very day. There are times when I'll walk into a room full of very senior professors and you feel woefully inadequate to be able to do your job. But what I've come to find out is that this is an absolutely natural occurrence. Everybody, it turns out, with a few exceptions, feels inadequate. And I even would go so far as to say that if you're not feeling inadequate, either you're just way too egotistical or you're not pushing yourself hard enough. Mm-hmm. And you should be feeling a little bit of competitiveness with your peers, but you should be able to recognize that your peers are feeling exactly that same emotion. And I've talked to some people who've done some spectacular things in their career, and they still feel inadequate. I don't think that ever goes away. It's part of the human condition. So for me, overcoming that and coming to terms with my feelings of inadequacy, or that I couldn't do something simply because somebody else would be able to do it better, that has been the biggest obstacle that I've had to overcome. And once I overcame it, now I feel I can do anything, because anybody else can do the same things that I can do. I don't feel like I'm particularly smarter than anybody else or better prepared than anybody else. I just like to do what I like to do, and it's that simple.
So how did you overcome those feelings?
It wasn't a wake up moment, like you might see in the movies. It was a gradual understanding that my colleagues had the same fears, the same feelings of inadequacy that I had. Simply by talking to them, I understood this, and then the realization that shouldn't be the case. Why should I have this and have to deal with it? Just send it away. So over time, I came to realize that this was only impeding me, and so by understanding that, it was easy to get rid of.
So looking forward, what do you see, where would you like to go, not necessarily leaving this place, but where would you like to go from here with your research?
That's a good question. And about 2 months ago, I was talking to somebody and they said, almost the same thing. And I came to the realization, I have achieved everything I wanted to achieve in my life. And this is a powerful thing, because then it leaves you with the idea of, well, what's next? What else am I supposed to do? When I was, let's say 10 years old, to pick a random number, I wanted to be making, this amount of money, and I wanted to be independent and somebody important in my life. I feel I've achieved much of that. And so now I had to sit back and reflect, what else do I want to do? And I kept thinking about that until I came to the realization that I don't have to think about it. I love what I do. And I don't have to now. I'm free of the onus of having to plan out my future. I can just enjoy it now. I can do the things that I like to do, as stressful as they sometimes may be, but I don't have to plan the future. And this is a very liberating idea for somebody who's gone through over 20 years of school, right? You're always taught to plan out what you want to do next. I don't. I can do what I like to do and keep doing what I'm doing, and it's all going to naturally start coming to me. So I've recently taken the idea that I need to step back and let things naturally progress along my own timeline, rather than pushing forward and being aggressive in my career and things like that. I can take a step back and really allow myself to mature into whatever it is. And I don't know what it is. I wish I could tell you. I wish I knew.
Well, it's sort of exciting, actually,
I think it's the most exciting thing, absolutely.
It's
I
very
can't
exciting,
wait,
and having
can't wait
that
to see what I
breadth
become.
Yeah, right, it is. It's very exciting. So I would like to take an opportunity now and open it up to the audience,
Sure.
if that's okay. And I'd like to see field questions from you all that you would like to ask Dr. Brothers.
Hi, my name is Karina. I'm currently a biology senior undergraduate, and I just completed my PhD applications last night.
Good luck.
So I've been asking around, and one of the things that I was really interested in is when you got to your doctoral level, what is one thing that you did not expect as far as the process? Because I hear it's grueling and you're there 24 hours in the lab and all these things. And so what did you find was the hardest thing as a PhD student? And what advice would you give to somebody like me who's just going into that field?
So there's a lot of hard stuff that happens in grad school. There are long hours, and I was not prepared for how hard it was going to be, how difficult it was going to be. If I had known, I might not be here today. I might have chosen a different path. But I'm glad that I didn't know at the same time, because you shouldn't know how hard it's going to be. That's part of the training process. And again, you feel bad about how woefully inadequate you are to keep up with everybody else. But again, that's part of the training process. So when I get a similar question is, how should I prepare for graduate school? And I said, don't. You're preparing for a training. No, don't prepare for training. Train. Focus on grad school. Focus on getting the best possible training you can get. Now, one mistake that I often see people make when they get into a grad school is they make a poor choice in mentor. And I think your choice in mentor is key to how successful you'll be after your grad school experience. Do not choose the easiest person to work for. You're not going to get trained that way. You have to choose somebody who fits in with your personality and who pushes you to your great limits. And I think that's the piece of advice I wish I had had, and I chose a difficult mentor who really pushed me. And this is the piece of advice that I give out most, is pick somebody who will help you rather than who just you work for. You're not a glorified technician. You need to be trained to do something more independent.
Hi, my name is Alana Vandervoort, and I'm a senior here at Florida International University. And I'm also looking to one day have a research-oriented career. And I feel much akin to your comments about inadequacy. Sometimes when I look at my mentors or PIs, I think, oh my gosh, they're so original and creative. Will I ever have this continual source of interesting questions? How do I become that? And so I guess I'd like to garner some insight how I should be thinking about that. And when did you feel like you were finally able to design a research program and you didn't have to worry about how creative you were, and what drives that? I guess I asked a lot of things, but
that's okay. I'm gonna boil it down to a very simple answer. You don't ever have to worry about that. That will come along naturally in your career. I was also similarly worried about how I can ask the good questions, but that's part of your training. You shouldn't have to worry about your training. That's why you're training, right? So desire to have that level of understanding of a system where you can ask sophisticated questions, but don't worry about how you're going to get there, because you're going to get there if you want to get there. And it's up to your mentor, which is why a mentor selection process is so important, and you to achieve that level of training where you can really be a good scientist. And so just don't worry about it. That's it. That's the simplest question. Don't stress about it. Don't worry about it. You'll get there. If I did it, you can do it, right? And that's the easiest answer. Don't worry about it.
So my question is, what sort of things I should look for on these interviews to make a fairly large decision after only knowing a place for a couple of days?
Well, that's a good question. You want to choose the right place. If you want to do a medically oriented biology program, you probably want a place that is connected to a hospital. If you want to do an environmental-based program, you want probably a place that has a good environmental program. Programmatic aspects aside, it's really not that big of a deal where you go to school. The much bigger decision is who your mentor is going to be. So if you can identify already 2 or 3 faculty members who are in those programs where you're applying, who you might like to work with or for, that is a powerful decision for how to choose a school. And as you go on these interviews, well, 2 things. First, go on as many interviews as you can, because I think they still pay for it, right? Okay, so free travel. But second, as you go on these interviews, you will automatically be drawn to one. I mean, it should be a fairly clear decision. Or if you have a very difficult decision, or if you're finding you're having a difficult time choosing one, then congratulations. You have an embarrassment of riches. So you can feel comfortable in many places, and you can say, well, I don't want to be in the hot Florida weather, so I'm going to move up north. So just look for those kinds of things. But more important is your mentor. Mentor, because that is the person who over the next 5 years is really going to mold you into the either good or bad scientist. And I've seen it both ways. Really, really bad mentors who didn't do what they should have been doing for their students. And it's a travesty. It should not happen, but it does. So you really have to be careful in choosing a mentor. And enjoy the free travel.
Hi, my name is Maurice. I'm a freshman here at FIU. I just have a question. What kept you motivated through your whole schooling process? I'm sure there's like some things that are like, oh man, is this today? Is this what I need? Like, because sometimes I feel like it's just like, so like what kept you focused and kept you seeing the light at the end of the tunnel?
Wow, that's a really good question. I guess I hadn't thought of it in those concrete terms, but there were 2 things, and one of them is going to be a controversial statement probably. The first is my love of what I do, and I think that's been fairly clear. The second one is money. I wanted to succeed in order to be well situated in life, and I we don't talk about that very much. We don't talk about, I want to be rich and those sorts of things. That can sometimes be a bad thing to say, but no, this has really driven me. I wanted to earn a living in my life. So as I was getting paid more and more, and as I was continuing to enjoy those things that I did, it wasn't even an option for me to change. So the motivation was that there was nothing better out there for me.
Hi, my name is Priscilla. I'm a senior, and I'm interested in going to pharmacy school. But my question is, did you ever feel like your motivation was challenged? Like, for instance, when I first started school, that was my primary motivation, was to be financially successful. But along the way, I had, I guess, some health issues, and it led me to believe that money, when it comes down to it, it's really nothing at all, So after I realized that money wasn't as important as I thought it would be, I started to ask myself, like, what am I going to do all these things for? Like, what's going to be my motivation now?
Right, and I think what you're saying is you need to have multiple motivations. My motivations were constantly being challenged. I have never and still don't make nearly as much money as I want to, and there were times where finances got extremely tight. That's always been a secondary motivation for me compared to my desire to be a scientist. I mean, let's be honest. I could make a lot more money doing something else, but if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't enter into that profession. So and I talk about those 2 as being my primary motivations, but there are also other motivations. As I said earlier, the aspect of my job, being able to help people even if they don't know it, is very, very important to me. And so when times get tough, I think about that. Money is a motivation. It is a motivator rather than a primary motivation, probably. But there are so many other wonderful aspects about my life and what I'm doing that all converge into this being the best career choice for me. And of course, this is going to be different. It's very individualistic. Many other people won't be motivated by the same things. They might not be motivated by helping people as much as I am, or by money as much as I am, or by the idea that science is fun. Maybe they're motivated by status. I'm not. I don't care that I have a PhD. I hate when people call me doctor. It sounds weird. Other people are motivated by that. They have to have that, and that's fine. That's just who you are. And so you have to embrace that. You have to understand it. And I think by understanding what your motivations are, it gives you a better clarity on how you want to proceed with your career in your life. Hi.
Absolutely. My question relates to a few questions you had earlier at your seminar. People were asking about the FDA and clinical trials, sure. And because you described, I don't really understand a lot of the slides about the pathways, and definitely didn't memorize the structure, but I was interested in the way it works in terms of what happens once, you and all your collaborators, because I'm sure it's a pretty big team that gets this ready for testing, right? Yeah, a lot of people. That's right. So it gets to the point where you're thinking of maybe doing human trials, and then that happens, and you also mentioned how it becomes much more expensive each phase that you go through.
That's right.
So since you work at UM, who takes care of this? I mean, because I know you wouldn't have to. Well, not just financially, but also I'm assuming there are legal issues, and so at some point, does your baby get taken away from you, kind of thing?
Well, no, you actually have to auction it off. It's worse. Yeah, I mean, even though I work with a large team of investigators, I think I had 40 names on the slide that I presented. It's nowhere near enough of the effort that it takes to get a drug, even into clinical trials. So one of the things I say about being a scientist, and I tell people who already have a PhD this, I say the most aggressive way to be a good scientist is to give everything you have away. And what that means is you're collaborating and you're working with other people who have the skill set and knowledge to make it better than what you can. And then what happens, and nobody talks about this, but this is what happens, they make it better and they give it right back to you. So while we're a big team now working on this one project, we need to become bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we invite people in and we actually beg them and plead with them to come and work on our projects. And, so through this mechanism, we start to get some of the expertise we need to be able to do this. Now, universities will also provide a great deal of support with legal issues, technology transfer. I work at a hospital, an institution that's closely related to several hospitals. And so there are clinicians available who know how to do clinical trials and those sorts of things. So it's an exercise in figuring out who you need to talk to in order to get your stuff, into the FDA clinical trials. And that becomes a good skill to have, is to figure out who you need to talk to, and also how to beg and plead for their time, because we're all busy people. But ultimately, I would be the driver of the project. I would be pushing this as far as I possibly can. And then at some point, it gets too big for the university, and we would need, especially in clinical trials, as we discussed before, you need such an amount of financial support that you need to partner with a company. And at that point, they will either buy the drug or buy the program, the scientific program from the university, or partner with the university to drive forward. But at that point, they take a majority of the financial stake in the drug. So financially speaking, I'm not expecting to get rich off of anything that I'm doing.
One of the things that we haven't discussed, and one of the things that's not often discussed, is really the balance between having a family and doing your science. Because as you said, science can take a lot of time. And those of us who are passionate about it do put in more than the typical 40-hour week.
Of course.
So do you have any thoughts or feelings that you can share about how you balance family and your passion for science? And
Sure. Well, I think one of the greatest things I've ever done is I did a lot of work during my graduate school years when I wasn't married and I didn't have children. Mm-hmm. And that catapulted me to a position where I could be a little bit more independent with my time. It also helps if your spouse understands what you do. My wife has a PhD in physiology and pharmacology and has worked on some of the same receptor signaling systems that I've worked on. So she understands inherently what it is to be a scientist and understands what it takes from time-wise. My kids don't understand that, and I do have two children. So what I do is I make sacrifices both on the family side, and I try to balance that with sacrifices in my career. I will, if I need to, wake up at 4 in the morning and I'll go to work at 5 and I'll be there until 5 in the afternoon, and at that time I'll be home for my children. So it's for me about balancing the sacrifices and making sure that I'm comfortable with the amount of sacrifices that I make. Right now I'm in a nice position where I can do a 9 to 5, well, let's not say, it's a 7:30 to 5, mm-hmm. And it works out well. Sometimes in grant season, it doesn't work out so well, and I do have to put in my afternoons, but then you balance it again. So my kids go to bed at 8:30 or so, so I will spend a few hours with them. Then after that, I'll go back to work. And you just work it out, and you make sure you have that balance, because without the support of my spouse, I wouldn't be anywhere. I wouldn't be able to get anywhere, and it would just be too much to balance. So achieving and striking that correct balance in your careers is very difficult. And honestly, I have it easy. Women in their careers and have it much more difficult when they have to choose between having a family and having their career move forward, and it can be a very difficult thing to balance. I can tell you one story. There was a young faculty member. She used to take her newborn baby and it would reside in her office. And so scientists have this flexibility. We're not dealing with customers, and we're not dealing with the wider public. So you can balance it in different ways. I know scientists who will go in to work at 11 a.m. and they'll work through 9 p.m. And we can adjust our hours like that largely. So it can be a little bit more flexible in that sense. Follow what you want to do. One thing I don't worry about, and I don't think I touched on this, is I never worry about how smart I am, because I know there's going to be somebody smarter and somebody less smart out there, and so it just doesn't matter. But follow what you want to do. Do what you really want to do, and that's the most important thing in life.
Shaun, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. This has been a great experience.
That you came and shared your day with us.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks so much.